My name is Meredith Callahan. I'm a district judge in Brookridge County, Virginia. But 2 weeks ago, in courtroom 2B, my sister Vanessa screamed across the room that I was worthless and needed to be removed for pretending to be someone important. She said it in front of a packed courtroom filled with reporters, lawyers, and half the city's elite. She had no idea the judge she was begging to throw me out was me. The silence that followed the bailiff's words, "All rise for the Honorable Judge Callahan," was unlike anything I've ever heard. The moment Vanessa looked up and saw me walking to the bench in my robes, the look on her face didn't just stop time. It rewrote it. But let's rewind, because you don't just end up in that moment by accident. That kind of moment is earned. Brick by brick. Blow by blow. For 30 years, I had been the quiet one, the overlooked one, the Callahan sister who never measured up, the one they left off holiday cards, the one they told to just be realistic. I never said much, but I watched. I listened. I remembered. They thought I'd be invisible forever, that I'd stay a waitress at Jimmy's Diner, folding napkins and scraping tips while Vanessa climbed her golden ladder. They never asked what I did after hours, where those scholarships really led, what kind of judge doesn't come from money. Until one day, they walked into a courtroom and found out. You see, people like my family, they worship power, but only when it comes in the package they approve of. They never realized the quiet girl they dismissed was building her own kind of power. And now, it was my turn to speak. Growing up in the Callahan household meant two things. Sunday was for church, and every other day was for comparison. My sister Vanessa and I were born 2 years apart, but the distance between us wasn't measured in time. It was measured in expectations. Vanessa was the golden girl from the very beginning. Straight teeth, piano recitals, private tutors. She wore silk uniforms while I ironed my secondhand blazers for school. When she got into Columbia, they threw her a garden party with white tents and imported macarons. When I graduated high school with honors and a scholarship to state, my mother handed me a checkbook and said, "Try to budget smarter than your sister does." I think the first time I realized I was disposable to them was when I got the flu at 13 and my father told me to stay in the basement so Vanessa wouldn't catch it before her SATs. No one brought me soup. No one asked how I was feeling. I stayed down there 3 days before I realized I could just walk upstairs. They weren't cruel in the way people write movies about. It was more subtle. 1,000 little cuts that you don't even realize are bleeding until you look down and see a red trail behind you. Vanessa followed the blueprint. Law school, society functions, golf lessons, a husband whose name came printed on cufflinks. She was a Callahan through and through. She knew how to shine. She knew how to be seen. Me? I was told I had a service temperament, that I was better suited for roles that support people, not lead them. When I said I wanted to study criminal justice, my father blinked like I'd asked for his car keys. "That's not law," he said. "That's logistics." So I waited tables at Jimmy's Diner, stacked my tips in a mason jar, and applied to Jefferson Law under a name they wouldn't recognize. I didn't want their money. I wanted my dignity. I didn't want their handouts. I wanted to win in a world where they wouldn't even recognize me. Every time Vanessa breezed into town with her designer bags and champagne voice, my mother would say, "Look how far she's come." And every time I offered to help with dinner or bring wine, she'd look at me and ask, "You're still working nights, right?" Yes, I was. But I was also reading case law on breaks, studying sentencing guidelines while cleaning tables, memorizing precedent while wiping mustard off booths. They thought I was stalled. They didn't realize I was studying for liftoff. By the time I left for grad school, I didn't even say goodbye. I just packed up my car and drove east. Nobody noticed. Or so I thought. Law school at Jefferson wasn't glamorous. My apartment had roaches, my textbooks were secondhand, and I shared a broken-down Honda with 2 other students for most of my first year. But it was mine. Every moment, every lecture, every 3 a.m. study session fueled something deeper than ambition. It was the quiet revenge of building a life no one thought I could have. I worked nights in the campus library, cataloging old law reviews and case files. During breaks, I devoured court transcripts like novels. My professors noticed early on, Not because I was loud or brilliant in class, but because I showed up, every single day. Even the days I felt like I didn't belong, like the world had been built for people like my sister. One professor, Judge Richard Ames, took me under his wing. He was sharp, no nonsense, and hated nepotism with a quiet fury. When I asked him once why he'd invited me to assist him on a summer court externship, he said, "Because you listen before you speak, and you ask better questions than the ones who expect answers handed to them." By the time I graduated, I'd earned a clerkship with the Brookridge District Court and a silent reputation for being the kind of woman who didn't just know the law, she respected it. Meanwhile, I kept my distance from home. Calls were rare, texts were formal. Vanessa got promoted to partner at her firm and sent out glossy newsletters at Christmas with photos of ski trips and charity galas. I never replied, not because I was bitter, but because I was busy. I prosecuted my first case at 28, a domestic violence trial that shook me to my bones. The survivor was a teenager, her voice barely audible. I stayed with her through the entire process. We won. I didn't go out drinking afterward. I went home and cried. That night, I knew. This was where I belonged. Over the next 5 years, I climbed. Slowly, deliberately. No headlines, no favors, just one case at a time. I didn't network, I outworked. And when an opening for district judge opened up, I didn't think I had a shot. But Judge Ames nominated me himself. "Let them underestimate you," he told me. "It's your greatest weapon." When the appointment was confirmed, my name was printed in the paper, just once, on page 8. My parents never called. Vanessa didn't send flowers. I thought maybe they'd missed it. Or maybe they didn't want to believe it. Fine by me. I wasn't doing it for them. I was doing it for every girl told she was too quiet, too plain, too practical to matter. I was doing it for the version of me still bussing tables at Jimmy's, wondering if the world would ever notice. Spoiler alert, it does. Just not in the way they expect. The email came in on a rainy Tuesday morning. I remember because I was on my second cup of stale coffee, trying to power through a docket filled with petty theft and zoning disputes. The subject line was innocuous. Estate dispute, woogie, Travers versus Travers. But the moment I opened the file, my stomach turned cold. Plaintiff, Vanessa Travers. Defendant, Lillian Travers. Estate value, $35.2 million. I blinked. The Travers name wasn't unfamiliar. Jason Travers, Vanessa's husband, came from a long line of shipping magnates, old money soaked in generational entitlement. The patriarch, Charles Travers, had passed 4 months prior, leaving behind a sprawling estate, a charitable foundation, and a bombshell trust clause that named Lillian Travers, Jason's younger sister, as primary heir. Vanessa was contesting the will. The claim? Unjust designation due to familial manipulation and lack of qualification. In other words, Vanessa believed Lily wasn't worthy. The attached complaint painted Lily as emotionally unstable, directionless, and dependent. It also included several supporting statements from anonymous sources suggesting Lily had received help from questionable individuals. One line stood out. Some of us worked our way up. We didn't spend our 20s as glorified waitresses and pretend that counts as growth. I read it 3 times before realizing who she was referring to. Me. Vanessa didn't know I'd be reading this case. She certainly didn't know I'd be assigned to oversee it. And she absolutely didn't know the judge she would stand before in a few weeks was the same little sister she told to keep pouring coffee and stay out of grown folks' business. I could have recused myself, but I didn't. Because something in that file didn't sit right. The trust Charles left was airtight. It was written by his own hand, notarized, and filed with explicit language, to be inherited by the family member who most embodies the values of service, justice, and humility. Not profit, not prestige, not power, service, justice, humility. The more I read, the more Lily reminded me of every woman I met in family court, the ones doing real work, uncelebrated and underfunded. I learned she ran a nonprofit that helped formerly incarcerated women find employment and housing. She'd turned down a 6-figure job in her brother's company Because in her words, no woman should owe her value to a man's approval, even if he's family. Meanwhile, Vanessa was parading around in media interviews, calling herself the rightful face of the Travers legacy. I called Caitlin Rios, a sharp, relentless legal aid attorney I respected, and asked her if she'd take Lily's defense. "Absolutely," she said. "But why the personal interest?" I didn't answer. Instead, I submitted paperwork confirming I'd preside over the case. Then I picked up the phone and called Jason Travers directly. He sounded tired, like a man slowly realizing the woman he married was no longer the woman he knew. "Meredith," he said quietly, "Vanessa doesn't want to protect the estate. She wants to own it and burn whoever stands in the way." It wasn't just a family dispute. It was a reckoning. And for once, I was going to be in the room when it happened. The moment I confirmed myself as presiding judge, I knew the scrutiny would come. So I kept my head down and built a case from the ground up, not to protect Lily, not even to punish Vanessa. I wanted the truth, and I wanted the court to see it without spin. Behind the scenes, I requested independent audits of both Lily's nonprofit and Vanessa's foundation, Women Rise. The difference was staggering. Lily's organization operated on a shoestring budget with transparent transactions and a direct impact trail. Women Rise, on the other hand, looked like a polished PR front. 80% of its expenses went to events and visibility. The remaining 20% was a mix of unexplained consulting fees and personal reimbursements. Yet received, including a $14,200 spa retreat Vanessa categorized as executive wellness. I knew that wouldn't be enough, not for the court, not for me. So I went deeper. I filed a quiet subpoena for Vanessa's law school records, and there it was, hidden beneath glossy transcripts and honorary mentions. A single line marked, Dean Override Academic Probation 2008. Curious, I checked the alumni donation records. That same semester, Harold Callahan, our father, made a $150,000 infrastructure grant to Columbia Law. They didn't buy her grades. They bought silence. I kept the file close. Every page felt heavier than the last. Not because it surprised me, but because it didn't. This was the family I grew up in. Appearance first, integrity second. Sometimes not at all. Meanwhile, I met with Caitlin in chambers, under the guise of pre-trial procedural review. What she brought me almost stopped my breath. A recorded voicemail. Vanessa's voice, angry and rushed. If that old man wanted to ruin our family by giving everything to his pet project of a sister, then good. Let him rot. Lily doesn't deserve a damn cent. It was time-stamped 2 days after Charles Travers died. I didn't need theatrics. I needed order. So I planned accordingly. 3 days before trial, I reviewed final witness lists. Jason Travers would be testifying. He'd agreed, voluntarily, to speak about his late father's intentions and the ongoing manipulation by Vanessa. I asked him a single question in private. "Do you believe Lily deserves what Charles left her?" He looked me in the eyes and said, "She earned it. Vanessa inherited power. Lily built purpose." The morning before the trial, I walked into my chambers early, carrying a folder thicker than any case I'd handled in years. I stared at my nameplate, Judge Meredith Callahan, and thought about all the times I'd written that name in notebook margins, never believing it could hold weight. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt ready. Vanessa had never been held accountable. Not by our parents, not by her husband, not even by herself. But the courtroom doesn't care about charm or birth order or designer heels. The courtroom cares about proof. And I had it. I had the donation logs, the voicemail, the audit reports. I even had an email Vanessa had sent to a mutual friend that read, "Lily wouldn't know legacy if it slapped her in the face. She's a placeholder, not an heir." A placeholder. That word echoed as I rehearsed my opening remarks. Because for most of my life, that's what I'd been too. A placeholder in someone else's spotlight. The sister who made the table look fuller in Christmas photos. The daughter whose name never made it into speeches. But not anymore. Tomorrow I wouldn't just wear the robe. I'd own it. Courtroom 2B was full before the clock even hit 9. The Travers estate case had made it into the business section, and in a town like ours, that was enough to bring out every bored lawyer and gossip columnist in a suit. Vanessa entered like she owned the place. Designer suit, perfect curls, smile rehearsed. Her legal team flanked her like a press conference. She didn't glance toward the bench, didn't need to. In her world, judges existed for her to impress, or intimidate. She hadn't realized yet. I waited until everyone was seated before stepping through the chamber door. All rise for the Honorable Judge Callahan. She heard the name before she saw me. Vanessa's head snapped toward the bench, confusion first, then recognition. And finally, something I'd never seen on her face before, fear. I met her stare calmly as I took my seat. No nod, no acknowledgement, just procedure. "You may be seated," I said. She didn't sit until I said it again. Caitlin began with the basics. The trust terms, Charles Travers's explicit language, Lily's record of service. Then came the voicemail. Static. Then Vanessa's voice. "Let him rot. Lily doesn't deserve a damn cent." No one moved. Vanessa's smile faltered. "I was grieving," she said quickly. "People say things they don't mean." Then came the audit trail. Personal expenses charged to her charity. Spa retreats labeled team building. A $14,000 wellness weekend for 2 in Napa. "Necessary," Vanessa explained. "Leadership has its burdens." Caitlin's voice didn't even rise. "Did your board approve these charges?" "I am the board," she replied. And then, like clockwork, she began shifting blame. To her assistant, her accountant, even Lily. She played my father-in-law. She fed him lies. "Or," I said from the bench, "he saw something in her worth believing in." Vanessa froze. "Excuse me?" I looked directly at her. "You called Lily, and people like her, placeholders. You said we don't understand legacy." Her face paled. "This is personal." "No," I said. "This is accountability." She stood up suddenly. "You're a waitress in a robe, that's what you are. Don't pretend you're better than me." I didn't blink. "No one's pretending," I said. "Least of all me." A beat of silence fell over the courtroom. Her attorney tugged her sleeve, but it was too late. Her mask had cracked. The ruling wasn't difficult. Based on the trust's language and Vanessa's own conduct, I ruled in favor of Lily Travers. The estate would transfer to her fully. Vanessa would receive $1, the token amount the trust allowed for any beneficiary found to act in bad faith. I tapped the gavel once. "This court is adjourned." Vanessa didn't wait. She gathered her purse with shaking hands and stormed out, heels clacking across marble like gunshots. The courtroom stayed frozen a few seconds longer. Then they rose. I stood slowly, aware of the silence behind me. I wasn't the girl in the background anymore. I wasn't the extra seat at Thanksgiving or the name skipped in newsletters. I was the one holding the gavel, and they knew it now. 3 days after the verdict, a letter arrived at my chambers. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. Sharp, elegant, calculated. Vanessa. "You humiliated me. I'll never forgive you." No signature, no apology. Just those 2 sentences, scrawled across thick cream stationery that probably cost more than my first car. I fed it to the shredder without a second thought. Later that afternoon, Lily stopped by with a small brown paper bag. "Banana bread, still warm." "I didn't know what judges liked," she said, sheepish but smiling. "But I figured we both appreciate things that take time." We sat for a while, not talking. Then she looked at me and said, "You didn't just see me. You saw through everything that tried to erase me." I blinked hard but said nothing. Just nodded. That weekend, I walked past Jimmy's Diner, the place where I folded napkins and read court rulings between orders. A new girl stood behind the counter, her apron stained, her eyes heavy. A worn copy of Introduction to Criminal Law peeked out from under the register. I paid for a coffee I didn't need and left her a $50 tip with a sticky note. "You're not just surviving, you're preparing. Keep going." Justice doesn't always wear a robe. Sometimes it wears tired shoes and hope tucked into a pocket. And sometimes the people the world forgets remember how to rise.